My name is Natasha Reynolds, 29 years old, and 3 days ago, my husband of 4 years showed me exactly what our marriage vows meant to him when I walked through our front door 12 hours earlier than expected. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special. I can't wait to share. I had just returned from what was supposed to be a week-long business conference in Denver, the Hartwell Marketing Summit, the biggest event in my industry. I had been working toward this moment for 2 years, preparing my presentation on digital transformation strategies that could revolutionize how mid-sized companies approach social media marketing. This wasn't just another conference. This was my shot at landing the promotion I'd been chasing, the one that would finally put me in the senior management track at Morrison & Associates. The presentation went better than I could have ever imagined. Standing there in that massive conference hall, watching 500 industry professionals hang on my every word, seeing the nods of approval from the Morrison partners who had flown in specifically to evaluate my performance, it was everything I had worked for. The questions afterward were thoughtful, engaged. 3 companies approached me immediately with headhunting offers. But more importantly, Richard Morrison himself pulled me aside and said the words I'd been dreaming of. "Natasha, we're fast-tracking your promotion. Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy. The announcement goes out Monday." I was floating. This promotion meant everything. Not just the $180,000 salary jump, but the validation that my late nights, weekend work sessions, and sacrifice social events had actually paid off. For 4 years, I'd been the one bringing home the steady income, while my husband, Trevor, pursued his entrepreneurial ventures. A food truck that lasted 8 months, a drop shipping business that never quite took off, and most recently, his photography studio that was just about to break even. I'd supported every dream, every pivot, every request for just a little more time to make it work. When Trevor needed $15,000 to upgrade his camera equipment, I liquidated my emergency savings. When his studio lease required a co-signer, I put my credit on the line. When he needed someone to handle his bookkeeping, social media, and client communications, I did it all after my own 12-hour workdays. Because that's what marriage meant, right? Supporting each other's dreams. The conference ended a day early due to a scheduling conflict with the keynote speaker, and instead of staying for the optional networking events, I decided to surprise Trevor. I wanted to share this incredible news in person, to finally tell him that all our sacrifices had been worth it. I imagined his face lighting up when I told him about the promotion, about how we could finally breathe financially, maybe even start talking about buying that house we'd been dreaming about in Riverside Heights. The flight back to Millbrook was smooth, and I practically bounced through the airport parking garage. I had texted Trevor from Denver that morning saying the conference was running long and I wouldn't be home until Friday evening. It was only Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. I had the perfect opportunity to surprise him. Our little townhouse on Maple Street looked exactly the same as always. Trevor's Jeep was in the driveway, which made sense since he typically worked from the home studio on Wednesdays. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, practically skipping up the front steps. I could already picture how this would go. I'd walk in, he'd be surprised and thrilled to see me, and then I'd share the amazing news about the promotion. Maybe we'd celebrate with that expensive bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. I slid my key into the lock as quietly as possible, wanting to maintain the element of surprise. The house seemed unusually quiet. No music playing from Trevor's studio, no sound of him on client calls like usual. Maybe he was editing photos with headphones on, I thought. But as I stepped into our living room, something felt off. There were 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, 2 glasses with lipstick marks. Not my lipstick. A woman's purse I didn't recognize sat on our kitchen counter. High heels by the front door that definitely weren't mine. And then I heard it. Laughter coming from upstairs. Trevor's laugh. mixed with someone else's, a woman's voice, breathy and intimate, followed by sounds that made my stomach drop to the floor. I stood there in our living room, suitcase still in my hand, staring at the evidence scattered around our home like breadcrumbs, leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. The promotion, the excitement, the future I thought we were building together, it all felt like it was happening to someone else now. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Trevor's voice, casual and relaxed. "I'll grab us some water from the kitchen." And in that moment, frozen in my own living room with my husband's betrayal echoing from our bedroom, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my future was about to change forever. The question wasn't what I had caught him doing. The question was what I was going to do about it. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. Time slowed to a crawl. I could hear Trevor's bare feet hitting each step as he descended our staircase, completely unaware that his wife was standing in the living room below. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts in the span of seconds. I could confront him right now. I could scream. I could throw something. I could run upstairs and face whoever was in our bed. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I stepped backward, silently, and slipped out our front door. I stood on our porch, key still in my trembling hand, and for the first time in 4 years of marriage, I saw everything with perfect clarity. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. The wine glasses, the purse, the comfortable way that woman's laughter had echoed through our home. This was routine. This was planned. This was my husband living a completely different life the moment he thought I was safely out of town. My phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "Hope the conference is going well, babe. Miss you. Can't wait until you're home Friday. Heart." I stared at that message, sent just 3 hours ago, and something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something much more dangerous. Calculation. I walked back to my car, loaded my suitcase into the trunk, and drove to Starbucks on Elm Street. I needed to think, and I needed to do it somewhere that felt safe and neutral. I ordered a large coffee and found a corner table where I could process what had just happened. The smart thing would be to go back, confront them both, demand explanations, probably end up in a screaming match that would resolve nothing. But as I sat there sipping my coffee and thinking about the woman's laughter I'd heard, a different plan began to form. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Wednesday, 3:15 p.m., arrived home early from Denver conference, found evidence of affair, wine glasses, unfamiliar purse, shoes, sounds from bedroom. Trevor believes I'm still at conference until Friday evening. I had 48 hours. 48 hours where Trevor thought he was safe, thought his secret was protected, thought he could continue his double life without consequence. What could I accomplish in 48 hours? First, I needed evidence. Not just what I had seen today, but a complete picture. I opened my laptop right there in Starbucks and logged into our shared phone plan account. Something I'd never thought to check before, but I was the primary account holder. I paid all our bills, after all. The location history was right there, clear as day. My hands shook as I scrolled through weeks of data. While I'd been working late, Trevor's phone had been at the Grand View Hotel. When I'd been at client dinners, his location showed restaurants I'd never been to, with timestamps that lined up perfectly with evenings when he'd claimed he was networking or working late on a shoot. There were patterns. Every Tuesday when I had my standing team meetings that ran until 8 p.m., every other Thursday when I attended the Morrison strategy sessions. Last weekend when I'd gone to my sister's baby shower, his phone had spent 6 hours at an address on Cherry Lane that I didn't recognize. I screenshotted everything, every location, every timestamp, every lie mapped out in GPS coordinates. Next, I logged into our joint bank account. Another thing I managed because Trevor was too creative to worry about finances. The spending patterns told their own story. Charges at restaurants for meals that cost twice what one person would spend.
hotel rooms booked on days when he told me he was working from home, charges at Victoria's Secret, lingerie I'd certainly never received. But the most telling detail was a reoccurring monthly charge I'd never noticed before: $1,200 to Harmony Luxury Apartments. A quick Google search revealed it was a furnished apartment complex downtown, the same complex that matched several of those GPS locations. My husband wasn't just having an affair. He was maintaining a second residence, a second life. I sat back in my chair, coffee growing cold, and realized that Trevor hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He'd been systematically stealing from our future to fund his deception. Money I'd been earning through my exhausting work days, money we'd been saving for our house, our future, our family, all of it funneled into supporting his elaborate lie. That's when the anger finally came. Not the hot, explosive kind that leads to broken dishes and screaming matches. This was something colder, more focused. This was the anger of someone who just realized they'd been treated like a fool for months, maybe years. I checked the time, 4:30 p.m. Trevor would be expecting me to call him around 6. I always checked in during conferences. That gave me 2 hours to prepare. I drove to the mall and bought a small recording device, the kind used for business meetings. Then, I went to the electronics store and purchased a hidden camera, designed to look like a phone charger. If Trevor was going to continue his double life thinking he was safe, I was going to document every moment of it.
By 6 p.m., I was parked outside a different coffee shop, ready to make my call. "Hey, babe." Trevor's voice was cheerful, relaxed. "How was Denver?" "Exhausting, but good," I said, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "The presentation went really well. I think Morrison was impressed." "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." The words sounded genuine, loving even. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I never would have suspected anything. "How's your day been?" I asked. "Pretty quiet. Did some editing, worked on the Johnson wedding photos. Just a normal Wednesday at home." Each word was delivered so smoothly, so convincingly. "Well, I should let you go. I've got dinner with some potential clients tonight. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Sounds perfect. Love you, Nat." "Love you too," I said, and for the first time in our marriage, the words felt like a lie. I hung up and sat in my car, engine off, watching other people go about their normal lives through the coffee shop windows. Tomorrow, Trevor would wake up thinking he'd successfully juggled another day of his double life. He'd probably text me good morning, maybe even send one of those sweet messages he was so good at. But I wouldn't be in Denver anymore. I'd be watching. I'd be documenting. And I'd be planning exactly how to dismantle the elaborate lie he'd built on the foundation of my trust and my money. The game had changed. Trevor just didn't know it yet. Thursday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. I'd spent the night at the Hampton Inn downtown paying cash, so there'd be no digital trail. My phone showed 3 missed messages from Trevor, all sent between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. "Morning, beautiful. Hope Denver's treating you well. Sunshine. Grabbed coffee at that place you like. Made me miss you even more. Big shoot today at Riverside Park. Love you, babe." Each message felt like acid in my throat, but I responded exactly as I would have before I knew the truth. "Morning, handsome. Busy day ahead, but thinking of you. Red heart." I was getting good at lying. Trevor had been an excellent teacher. By 9 a.m., I was parked across the street from our townhouse, watching. The recording device was clipped inside my jacket, and I'd positioned the hidden camera in my purse with a clear view. At exactly 9:47 a.m., a silver BMW pulled into our driveway. I'd never seen the car before, but I wasn't surprised when a tall brunette in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses stepped out like she owned the place. She had a key. I watched her let herself into my home, into my life, with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this dozens of times. She even paused to check our mailbox, before going inside.
Through our front window, I could see her moving around our living room, making herself comfortable on our couch. 20 minutes later, Trevor's Jeep pulled up. He practically bounded to the front door, flowers in one hand, a coffee carrier in the other. The flowers weren't from our usual grocery store. These were expensive, from Petals and Blooms on 5th Street, the same florist where he'd claimed he couldn't afford to order arrangements for my birthday last month. I turned on the recording device and began narrating what I was seeing, keeping my voice low and steady. Thursday, 10:08 a.m. Subject arriving at marital residence with flowers and coffee for unidentified female. Female appears to have key access to property. For 2 hours, I documented everything. The way they moved around our house like a couple, how she answered our landline when it rang, answered my phone line with casual familiarity. The moment when they both appeared on our back deck, drinking coffee from the mugs I'd bought for Trevor and me during our honeymoon in Savannah. But the breaking point came at 12:30 p.m. I watched through our kitchen window as Trevor showed her something on his laptop. They were looking at photos together, and even from across the street, I could see them both laughing. Then Trevor stood up, walked to our kitchen drawer, the one where we kept important documents, and pulled out a folder. Our house hunting folder. The one filled with listings for homes in Riverside Heights that we'd been saving for. Properties we'd discussed, neighborhoods we'd driven through together, plans we'd made for our future. And there was my husband, showing our potential homes to another woman, pointing at features and floor plans while she nodded enthusiastically. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This wasn't just sex or emotional connection. Trevor was literally planning a future with this woman using the life he'd built with me as the foundation. I forced myself to keep recording, to stay calm, to document every detail. But inside, something fundamental was shifting. The methodical approach I'd planned was fighting against a growing need for immediate confrontation. At 1:35 p.m., my phone rang. Trevor. "Hey, babe, how is the conference going?" Through our window, I could see him pacing our kitchen while talking to me, the other woman still seated at our kitchen table, still looking through our house hunting folder. "It's going well," I managed, watching him lie to me in real time. "Just finished a networking lunch."
That's awesome. I'm actually just finishing up this Riverside Park shoot I mentioned. Should be wrapping up soon. I watched him gesture to the woman, who smiled and mouthed something I couldn't make out. "How did the shoot go?" I asked, testing him. "Really well. Great lighting today. The clients are going to love these photos." His voice was warm, convincing. If I hadn't been watching him stand in our kitchen, I would have believed every word. "That's wonderful, honey. I should probably get going. Afternoon session starts soon." "Okay, love you. Can't wait to have you home tomorrow night." "Love you too." I hung up and immediately called the one person I trusted completely, my sister, Rachel. "Nat, aren't you supposed to be in Denver? I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you not to ask questions until I'm finished." I told her everything. The early return, the discovery, the evidence I'd gathered, what I was witnessing right now. By the time I finished, Rachel was silent for a long moment. "Jesus, Natasha, how long do you think this has been going on?" "Based on the bank records and GPS data, at least 8 months, maybe longer." "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do with a husband who was living a double life so elaborate it included planning a future with another woman while still married to me? I don't know yet, but I'm not done gathering evidence. At 2:45 p.m., I followed them. Trevor and the mystery woman left our house together, got into her BMW, and drove downtown. I maintained a careful distance, feeling like a spy in my own life. They pulled into the parking garage of the Grandview Hotel, the same hotel that had appeared repeatedly in Trevor's location history. I parked across the street and watched them walk into the lobby hand in hand.
They moved with the easy familiarity of a couple who'd done this many times before. At the front desk, Trevor didn't need to provide identification or a credit card. They handed him a key card immediately. A regular reservation. A routine. My phone buzzed with a text. Shoot running longer than expected. Might be a late night. Don't wait up. I screenshot the message while watching the hotel lobby where my husband had disappeared with another woman. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and made a list. Not just of what I'd discovered, but of what it all meant. Trevor hadn't just cheated, he'd created an entirely separate life. He had a girlfriend who had a key to our house. He was looking at houses with her. He had a standing hotel reservation. He'd been systematically lying to me for months while I worked overtime to support his business ventures. But what hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that while I'd been exhausting myself trying to build a future for us, Trevor had been planning a future without me. Every time I'd worked late to pay for his equipment, every time I'd sacrificed so he could chase his dreams, every time I'd prioritized our financial goals, he'd been using those resources to court another woman. I looked at my phone. Trevor had sent 2 more messages. Miss you so much, and counting down the hours until you're home. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Because Trevor thought he was safe. He thought his lies were working. He thought he had everything under control. Tomorrow, he was going to learn just how wrong he was. Friday morning brought a new level of Trevor's deception that I hadn't anticipated. My phone rang at 8:15 a.m. with his usual cheerful voice. "Morning, gorgeous. I know you're probably getting ready for your last day, but I wanted to catch you before things got crazy." "Morning," I said, still in my hotel room, still playing the role of the unsuspecting wife in Denver. "Listen, I have some amazing news. Remember that corporate client I've been trying to land, Meridian Tech? They just called and want to book a huge shoot for next weekend. It could be the breakthrough that I've been waiting for." I sat up straighter. Meridian Tech was a company I'd actually heard of, a legitimate business that could indeed be a major client for a photographer. But given everything I'd discovered, I was immediately suspicious. "That's wonderful, honey. What kind of shoot?" "Corporate headshots and some promotional material. The thing is, they want to do it at this exclusive resort upstate, Lakewood Manor. It's a 2-day retreat-style shoot, very high-end. They're covering all expenses, of course." Lakewood Manor. I had heard of it. Couples retreat destination, luxury suites, romantic lakeside dining. "When?" I asked, though I already knew what he was going to say. "Next weekend, Friday through Sunday. I know it's our anniversary weekend, but Nat, this could change everything for the studio. This is exactly the kind of client that leads to more corporate contracts. Our 3rd wedding anniversary. The weekend we'd been planning for months. Dinner at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where he'd proposed. A weekend getaway to the bed and breakfast in Millfield that we'd booked 6 months ago. And he was using it to take another woman on a romantic retreat." "I understand," I heard myself say. "Business comes first, right? We can celebrate our anniversary another time."
You're the best wife in the world. You know that? I'll make it up to you. I promise. After hanging up, I immediately called Meridian Tech. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes of hold music, but I finally reached their marketing department. "Hi, this is Natasha Reynolds calling on behalf of my husband's photography studio. He mentioned you'd scheduled a corporate shoot for next weekend at Lakewood Manor." The marketing coordinator sounded confused. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any photography shoots scheduled. We handle all our corporate imaging in-house. Are you sure you have the right company?" The lie was so elaborate, so detailed, that part of me almost admired Trevor's creativity. He'd invented an entire fake client to explain away a romantic weekend with his girlfriend. But the admiration was quickly overwhelmed by the realization of how calculated this all was. I spent the morning making more calls. To Lakewood Manor first. They confirmed a reservation for Mr. and Mrs. Trevor Reynolds for the following weekend. The nerve of him using my name while planning to take another woman. When I asked about changing the reservation, they informed me that the booking had been paid for with our joint credit card. My credit card. Next, I called our insurance company. If Trevor was living some double life, I needed to know the full extent of it. What I discovered made my stomach turn. 3 months ago, Trevor had called to add a second vehicle to our policy. The silver BMW I'd seen the mystery woman driving was insured under our joint policy. I was paying to insure his girlfriend's car. But the real shock came when I called our health insurance provider. Trevor had attempted to add a dependent to our plan just 6 weeks ago, someone named Cassandra Mills. The request had been denied because he couldn't provide a marriage certificate, but the fact that he'd tried to put his girlfriend on my health insurance was breathtaking in its audacity. Armed with this information, I decided to visit the Harmony Luxury Apartments where Trevor had been spending $1,200 a month. The leasing office was modern and upscale, with a receptionist who clearly recognized the apartment number when I mentioned it. "Oh, you must be here about the Reynolds unit," she said brightly. "Are you thinking of upgrading your lease?" "Actually, I'm Trevor's wife. There seems to be some confusion about the account." Her face fell immediately. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lease is under Trevor Reynolds and Cassandra Mills. They're listed as domestic partners." Domestic partners. He'd signed a lease with this woman as domestic partners while married to me. "Could I see the lease application?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She hesitated, then pulled up the file on her computer. What I saw there was devastating. Trevor had listed Cassandra Mills as his partner of 2 years. He used our joint bank statements as proof of income, essentially using my earnings to qualify for an apartment with another woman. In the emergency contact section, he had listed his mother and Cassandra, not me. His wife of 4 years wasn't even mentioned. "When does their lease expire?" I asked. "They just renewed for another year last month. Lovely couple, very quiet. They even put down a deposit for the premium unit that's opening up in the spring." I walked out of that office feeling like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Trevor wasn't just having an affair. He was building a completely separate legal and financial identity with this woman. He'd established residency with her, tried to get her health insurance through my policy, insured her car on our account, and was planning to upgrade their living situation. Back in my hotel room, I spread out all the evidence I'd gathered. Bank statements showing charges for the apartment, the car insurance, romantic dinners, and hotel stays. Phone records showing a pattern of deception. GPS data proving his lies about his whereabouts. Photos I'd taken of them together. The fake Meridian text story about our anniversary weekend getaway. But what emerged was bigger than just an affair. Trevor had essentially created a second marriage while still legally bound to his first one. He was living as Cassandra Mills' domestic partner while taking money from his actual wife to fund that relationship. Every business expense I'd covered, every bill I'd paid, every sacrifice I'd made for our future had actually been subsidizing his other life. My phone rang. "Rachel, how are you holding up?" I found out her name, Cassandra Mills, and Rachel, it's so much worse than I thought. I told her about the apartment lease, the insurance attempts, the fake Meridian text story about our anniversary weekend getaway. Jesus Christ, Natasha, this isn't just cheating. What is this? Fraud? Bigamy? I don't know what it is legally, but I know what it is practically. He's been living as a married man with another woman while using my income to pay for that relationship. What are you going to do? I looked at the pile of evidence spread across my hotel bed. Bank statements, phone records, photographs, lease documents, insurance papers, a complete picture of Trevor's double life, funded by my career success and enabled by my trust. I'm going to make sure everyone who needs to know the truth actually knows it, starting with Cassandra Mills. Because if Trevor thought he could juggle two relationships indefinitely, if he believed he could use my money to court another woman while lying to both of us, then it was time for all of us to have the same information. The game of secrets was about to end, and Trevor was about to discover that some secrets, once exposed, destroy everything they were meant to protect. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow, I was supposed to come home from Denver, unsuspecting and grateful for his fake consideration about our anniversary. Instead, I was going to walk into our house with 4 days' worth of evidence and a plan that would ensure Trevor's carefully constructed double life collapsed entirely. He wanted to play house with another woman using my resources? Fine! But he was going to do it honestly, with everyone involved knowing exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. Friday evening arrived with Trevor's final performance. I'd driven home that afternoon, officially returning from Denver, and walked into our house to find it spotless. Fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, different ones from what he'd brought Cassandra yesterday, candles lit throughout the living room, our wedding photo prominently displayed on the mantel, moved from its usual spot in the hallway. Trevor greeted me at the door with a kiss that felt like poison, his arms wrapping around me with practiced affection. "Welcome home, beautiful. I missed you so much." The performance was flawless. Dinner was my favorite takeout from Romano's Italian. He'd even bought a bottle of the wine we'd shared on our first anniversary. As we sat at our kitchen table, the same table where he'd shown house listings to another woman just yesterday, Trevor played the role of devoted husband with Academy Award precision. "Tell me everything about Denver," he said, reaching across to hold my hand. "I want to hear about every moment of your presentation." I told him about the conference, about the promotion, watching his face light up with what seemed like genuine pride and excitement. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen, documented what I'd documented, I might have believed this was real. "Senior Vice President, Natasha, that's incredible! We should celebrate properly. Maybe this weekend we could drive up to Millfield, stay at that bed and breakfast we'd booked." The casual way he said it, knowing he'd already planned to spend our anniversary weekend with Cassandra at Lakewood Manor, was breathtaking. He was lying to me while looking directly into my eyes, holding my hands, using our shared memories as props for his deception. "That sounds wonderful," I said, matching his energy. "I can't wait to celebrate with my husband." That night, I lay in bed beside Trevor, listening to his peaceful breathing, and finalized my plan. Because Trevor's web of lies wasn't just hurting me. It was built on deceiving multiple people. Cassandra Mills had no idea she was the other woman in an elaborate fraud. His family thought he was a successful photographer with a supportive wife. His few genuine clients believed they were hiring an honest businessman. Our mutual friends saw us as a happy couple working toward our dreams together. Trevor had created a house of cards, and it was time for everyone to see it collapse simultaneously. Saturday morning, Trevor left early for what he claimed was a last-minute client consultation. I knew he was actually preparing for his romantic weekend with Cassandra. Once his Jeep pulled out of our driveway, I put my plan into motion. First, I drove to Cassandra's actual address, not the apartment she shared with Trevor, but the address listed on her BMW registration that I'd obtained through a private investigator I had hired Friday afternoon. She lived in a modest duplex in the West Side neighborhood, and when I knocked on her door at 10 a.m., she answered in pajamas with a coffee cup in her hand. "Cassandra Mills?" I asked. "Yes. My name is Natasha Reynolds. I'm Trevor Reynolds' wife." The coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on her front porch. Her face went white, then red, then white again. "That's not... Trevor isn't... married? For 4 years. Here's our wedding certificate."
And here's documentation showing that you've been living with my husband in an apartment paid for with my earnings, driving a car insured under my policy, while he uses my income to take you on romantic getaways. I handed her the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements with the apartment payments highlighted, insurance documents showing her BMW, GPS records showing Trevor's lies about his whereabouts, photos I'd taken of them together at our house. I don't understand, she whispered, sinking onto her porch steps. We've been together for 2 years. We're planning to get married. He said his divorce was almost final. There's no divorce, Cassandra. There never has been. While you thought you were building a relationship with a single man working through a separation, you were actually helping a married man commit financial fraud against his wife. She stared at the documents, her hands shaking. The apartment lease? We just renewed it. He said we were domestic partners. You are, legally speaking, while he's also legally married to me. Trevor has been living as your boyfriend while being my husband, using my income to fund both relationships.
I sat down beside her on the steps. Cassandra, I'm not here to hurt you. We're both victims of the same man's lies, but I thought you deserved to know the truth before you waste any more of your life on someone who's never been honest with you. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. You're supposed to be in Denver for work. I came home early Wednesday and found evidence of the affair. I've spent the last 3 days documenting everything. Trevor thinks he's going to take you to Lakewood Manor this weekend for a romantic getaway, while telling me it's a business trip. Lakewood Manor, she repeated numbly. For our 2-year anniversary? It's also my wedding anniversary with him today. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Cassandra looked at me with something that might have been respect. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure everyone who's been lied to knows the truth, starting with Trevor's family, our friends, his business associates, and the legal authorities who need to investigate the financial fraud. I handed her a business card. This is a lawyer who specializes in these situations. Trevor's actions might have legal consequences for you since you unknowingly participated in some of the deception. You should protect yourself. By noon, I was at Trevor's parents' house in Oakwood Heights. Margaret and David Reynolds had always treated me like a daughter, and they deserved to know what their son had become. Natasha, dear, how was Denver? Trevor said your presentation went wonderfully. It did. But I need to talk to you both about something important. About Trevor. David emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a cloth. Is everything all right? I spread the evidence across their kitchen table just as I had with Cassandra. The apartment lease listing Trevor as domestic partners with another woman, the bank statements showing my income funding his double life, the GPS records proving his systematic lies, photos of him with Cassandra at our house. Margaret sank into a chair, her face aging 10 years in 10 seconds. David's jaw worked silently as he processed what he was seeing. I don't understand, Margaret whispered. Trevor talks about you constantly, about your future together, about buying a house, starting a family. He talks about that future with Cassandra Mills, too. In fact, he's been showing her listings for the same houses he discusses with me, houses we'd buy with my income while he maintains relationships with both of us. David's face was red with anger and embarrassment. How long has this been going on? Based on the evidence, at least 2 years, possibly longer. Where is he now? David asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He thinks he's preparing for a business trip. Actually, he's getting ready to take his girlfriend to a luxury resort for the weekend on our wedding anniversary using my money. That afternoon, the phone calls began. Margaret called her sister. David called Trevor's business mentor. I called our mutual friends, our neighbors, the people at Morrison & Associates who'd met Trevor at company events. Each conversation was the same. Shock
disbelief, then anger, as they realized how completely Trevor had deceived everyone. But the call I was most looking forward to came at 6 p.m. Trevor, checking in from what he claimed was his pre-trip client meeting. "Hey, babe, just wanted to let you know the Meridian Tech thing is all set. Heading up to Lakewood Manor tonight. I'll miss you so much this weekend." "I'll miss you too, honey," as I looked out my window at a small crowd that had gathered in our driveway. Margaret and David Reynolds, our neighbors the Johnsons, who'd always invited us to their barbecues, Rachel and her husband Mike, even Cassandra Mills, who'd apparently decided she wanted to be present when Trevor's world collapsed. "Trevor," I said sweetly, "when you get back from your business trip, we need to talk. There are some people here who want to see you." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long. Then quietly, "What people, Natasha? Your parents? Your girlfriend? The neighbors who've been listening to your lives for 2 years? Oh, and a private investigator who's been documenting your financial fraud." Another long pause. "I can explain everything." "I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, Trevor. But this time, you're going to give them to everyone at once." I hung up and turned to face the group assembled in our living room. People who trusted Trevor, believed in him, supported him. People who'd been unknowingly participating in his elaborate deception simply by accepting his version of reality. "He'll be home soon," I announced, "and then we're all going to hear the truth together." Through the window, I watched cars pulling up. More neighbors, drawn by the unusual gathering. Some of Trevor's photography clients who'd gotten word about what was happening. The small crowd was becoming a larger one, and soon Trevor would drive home expecting to find an empty house and a trusting wife. Instead, he was going to find his entire world waiting for him, armed with evidence and demanding answers. The reckoning had arrived. Trevor's Jeep pulled into our driveway at 8:47 p.m. Through the living room window, I watched him sit in his car for almost 5 full minutes, staring at the unusual number of vehicles parked along our street. His parents' sedan, Rachel's SUV, the Johnsons' pickup truck, Cassandra's BMW, cars belonging to neighbors and friends who'd never all been at our house simultaneously. When he finally stepped out, his movements were careful, calculated. He was trying to assess the situation before walking into what he clearly recognized as a trap. I almost felt sorry for him in that moment. Almost. Because for all his lies and manipulation, Trevor had never actually faced the consequences of his actions. Tonight, that was about to change. He opened our front door slowly, and the first person he saw was his mother, sitting rigidly in our wingback chair with red-rimmed eyes and a tissue clutched in her hand. "Mom?" His voice cracked slightly. Why is everyone here?" "Hello, Trevor," I said from my position near the fireplace, surrounded by the evidence I'd spread across our coffee table. "How was your client meeting with Meridian Tech?" His eyes darted around the room, taking inventory. His parents, looking older and more disappointed than I'd ever seen them. Our neighbors, who'd always admired what they thought was his entrepreneurial spirit. Rachel and Mike, who'd been our double-date companions for years. His client, Mrs. Patterson, who'd hired him for her daughter's wedding photos. And in the corner, almost hidden behind the others, Cassandra Mills, staring at him with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "I can explain," he said, the same phrase he'd used on the phone. But his voice was shaking now, and his usual confidence had evaporated. "Please do," I replied calmly. "Start with Meridian Tech. Tell everyone about this corporate client that booked you for a shoot at Lakewood Manor this weekend." Trevor's face went pale. He looked directly at me, and I saw the moment he realized I knew everything. "Natasha, can we talk privately? This is between us." "Actually, it's not," David Reynolds said, standing up from the couch. His voice was quiet, but lethal. "According to these documents your wife showed us, this involves a lot of people, including the young lady you've been lying to for 2 years. Trevor's gaze found Cassandra for the first time, and the recognition in his eyes was instantaneous. Cass, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. What it looks like, Cassandra said, her voice steady despite her tears, is that you've been married this entire time. What it looks like is that every moment of our relationship has been built on lies. That's not true. My marriage was over. I told you I was getting divorced. Show us the divorce papers. Show everyone here the documentation of this divorce you've been claiming for 2 years. The silence stretched painfully. Trevor opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Mrs. Patterson, his elderly client, spoke up from her seat near the window. Trevor, dear, I don't understand. You photographed 3 weddings for my family. You always spoke so lovingly about Natasha. You said she was your inspiration. She is, Trevor said desperately, turning to me with pleading eyes. Nat, you are my inspiration. This thing with Cass, it just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. Which thing? The affair? The secret apartment? The joint lease where you listed her as your domestic partner? The attempt to add her to my health insurance? The fact that you're using my income to fund a completely separate life. Each item hit him like a physical blow. He looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, someone who might offer him support or an escape route. He found none. I need to sit down, he said weakly. No, Margaret Reynolds said firmly. You need to tell the truth. For once in your life, Trevor, you need to stop lying and tell these people the truth. I love both of you, he said, looking between Cassandra and me. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people, Rachel interjected. You hurt your wife, who's been supporting your dreams while you used her money to cheat on her. You hurt Cassandra, who thought she was in a committed relationship with an available man. You hurt your parents, who've been bragging about their successful son and devoted daughter-in-law while you were committing fraud. It's not fraud. Everything I did was with money I had access to. Natasha and I have joint accounts. Joint accounts that you emptied to fund an affair. Joint accounts that you used to pay for another woman's car insurance while your wife worked 60-hour weeks. And what about the fake business trips? I asked. What about lying to Cassandra about being divorced? What about using our anniversary weekend to take her on a romantic getaway? Anniversary weekend? Margaret gasped. Trevor, today is your anniversary. The room fell completely silent. In all his calculations, all his lies and manipulation, Trevor had apparently forgotten that his mother would remember his wedding date.
I was going to celebrate with Natasha next weekend, he said weakly. While you're legally committed to a romantic retreat with another woman, Cassandra said bitterly. A retreat you booked using your wife's credit card. Trevor began to pace, running his hands through his hair. This is all wrong. You're all making this sound worse than it is. I'm not a bad person. I got confused. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I pulled out the folder with the bank statements. Let me read you some of your mistakes, Trevor. Harmony Luxury Apartments, $1,200 per month for 8 months. BMW Insurance Edition, $240 per month for 6 months. Dinners at Romano's, Chez Laurent, and the Riverside Grill, $3,400 over the past 4 months. Hotel stays at the Grandview, $1,800 over 6 months. Jewelry purchases at Tiffany & Co., $2,200. All paid for with my earnings while I believed we were saving for our future. With each item, Trevor seemed to shrink smaller. The numbers laid out like that, in front of everyone, painted a picture of systematic deception and financial betrayal that was impossible to minimize. Trevor, Cassandra said quietly, did you ever love me? Or was I just... what was I to you? He looked at her with what might have been genuine pain. I do love you, Cass. I love you both. I know that doesn't make sense, but
It doesn't make sense because it's not love. Love doesn't involve lying every single day. Love doesn't involve using your partner's money to pursue other relationships. Love doesn't involve creating fake business trips to cover romantic getaways with someone else. What do you want from me? Trevor finally exploded. What do you want me to say? That I'm a terrible person? That I've ruined everything? Fine, I'm terrible. I've ruined everything. Are you happy now? The outburst felt like the tantrum of a child caught stealing cookies, not the remorse of a man who'd systematically betrayed everyone who trusted him. What I want, I said calmly, is for you to understand that actions have consequences, and your actions have consequences for a lot of people. I handed him a manila envelope. Those are divorce papers, Trevor. I filed them this afternoon. You're also going to find a restraining order that prevents you from accessing any of our joint accounts, and a notice that you have 30 days to remove your belongings from this house. His face went white. Natasha, please, we can work this out. Couples therapy, counseling, whatever you want. I'll end things with Cass. I'll do anything. Now I'm something to end? Cassandra stood up, grabbing her purse. Trevor, don't bother. We're already ended. The moment I found out you were married, we were done. She paused at the door and looked back at him. For what it's worth, I actually did love you, the person I thought you were. But that person never existed, did he? Trevor reached for her, but she stepped away. Cass, please. Goodbye, Trevor. As the door closed behind Cassandra, Trevor turned back to me with desperate eyes. Nat, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. 4 years of marriage has to count for something. I looked at this man I once loved, this person I'd built a life with, and felt nothing but profound sadness for who he'd chosen to become. 4 years of marriage would count for something, Trevor. But we haven't had 4 years of marriage. We've had 4 years of you lying to me while I unknowingly funded your other relationship. That's not a marriage. That's not even a partnership. That's just me being used. One by one, the others began to leave. His parents, who barely looked at him as they walked out. Our neighbors, whispering among themselves about what they witnessed. His clients, who now questioned everything they'd believed about his character. Finally, it was just Trevor and me in our living room, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal and the ruins of everything we'd built together. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, you live with the consequences of your choices. All of them. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange blur of legal meetings, document signings, and the methodical dismantling of a shared life. Trevor had moved out immediately after the confrontation, staying first with his brother Jake, then at a cheap motel when Jake's wife made it clear he wasn't welcome long-term. The restraining order prevented him from accessing our joint accounts, which meant his elaborate double life collapsed overnight. But Trevor Reynolds wasn't done fighting. It started with the phone calls, dozens of them, from different numbers when I blocked his personal phone. Sometimes he was angry, ranting about how he'd humiliated him in front of everyone he knew. Sometimes he was pleading, insisting that what we had was worth saving. Sometimes he tried manipulation, claiming his affair was actually my fault for working too much and not paying attention to his needs. I didn't answer any of them. Then came the messages through mutual friends. Sarah Chen, who worked at the marketing firm down the street from Morrison & Associates, approached me at the coffee shop on Elm Street. Natasha, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Trevor asked me to talk to you. He says you won't take his calls.
That's correct, I said, not looking up from my laptop. He seems really broken up about everything. He says he made mistakes, but he loves you and wants to make it right. I finally looked at Sarah, who'd always been more Trevor's friend than mine. Did he mention that his mistakes included maintaining a 2-year relationship with another woman? Using my income to pay for their apartment and romantic getaways, and lying to both of us about his marital status? Sarah's face fell. He said it was complicated. It's not complicated, Sarah. It's fraud. And I'm not interested in reconciliation with someone who views systematic deception as a relationship strategy. The messages through intermediaries stopped after that conversation made its way back to Trevor. Next came the written pleas. Letters slipped under my office door, left on my car windshield, mailed to my sister's house when he couldn't reach me directly. Each one was a masterpiece of manipulation, carefully crafted to hit different emotional buttons. One letter talked about our early days together, reminiscing about our first apartment, our weekend trips to the coast, the dreams we'd shared about our future. Another focused on his supposed transformation, claiming he'd realized the error of his ways and was seeking therapy to become the husband I deserved. A third tried to reframe the entire affair as a mental health crisis, suggesting that the stress of his failing business ventures had driven him to make irrational decisions. I kept every letter, not out of sentimentality, but because my lawyer advised that they might be useful in the divorce proceedings. The most manipulative attempt came through his mother. Margaret Reynolds called me on a Thursday evening, her voice heavy with the kind of maternal authority she'd never used with me before. "Natasha, dear, I think you should consider giving Trevor another chance." I'd been expecting this call. Margaret had always been protective of her son, and I knew she was struggling with the revelation of what he'd become. "Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but she's destroyed, Natasha, completely broken. I've never seen him like this. He's lost weight, he can't sleep, he's talking about how his life is over." "His life isn't over. He's experiencing consequences for his choices. That's different." "But you loved each other. 4 years of marriage has to count for something." I took a deep breath. Margaret was a good woman who was watching her son face the results of his actions, and I understood her pain. But I couldn't let her guilt me into enabling Trevor's behavior. "Margaret, let me ask you something. If David had spent 2 years living with another woman, using your money to pay for their apartment and romantic getaways, and lying to both of you about his marital status, would you take him back because he was sad about getting caught?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched long. "That's different," she finally said, but her voice had lost her conviction. "It's not different. Trevor made calculated decisions every single day for 2 years. He chose to lie to me every morning when he said he loved me. He chose to steal from our joint accounts to fund his other relationship. He chose to plan a future with another woman while married to me. These weren't mistakes or mental health episodes. They were deliberate choices. He says he'll do anything to make it right. Margaret, there is no making this right. There's only learning to live with what he's done. And I've learned that I deserve better than a husband who views marriage as something optional." After that conversation, Margaret stopped calling. But Trevor's most desperate attempt came 6 weeks after our confrontation, in the form of a public gesture that was so miscalculated it was almost embarrassing to witness. I was leaving Morrison & Associates for a late meeting when I found Trevor waiting by my car in the parking garage. He looked terrible, thinner, unshaven, wearing clothes that suggested he'd been living rough. But what made me stop in my tracks wasn't his appearance. It was the scene he'd staged. My car was surrounded by candles, dozens of them placed carefully on the concrete floor of the parking garage in what was clearly meant to be a romantic pattern. Rose petals were scattered across my windshield and hood, and Trevor stood in the middle of it all, holding a jewelry box that probably contained an expensive peace offering. "Natasha," he said as I approached, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but what we had was real. What we built together matters. I love you, and I know you still love me." I looked at this elaborate display, the fire hazard of candles in an enclosed garage, the cliché romance of rose petals, and the desperate grand gesture of a man who'd learned nothing from his exposure. "Trevor, you need to leave. The restraining order. I don't care about the restraining order. I care about saving our marriage." He stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "Nat, please, just listen to me. I know I can fix this." "You can't fix this because you still don't understand what you broke." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling security."
"Don't!"
His voice cracked with desperation. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. Let me explain what really happened." "I know what really happened, Trevor. I documented it for 4 days, remember? I have bank statements, GPS records, photographs, and witness testimony. I don't need your explanation." "That's just facts and numbers. That doesn't tell you how I felt, how confused I was, how much pressure I was under with the business failing and trying to make you proud." I stared at him, this man I'd once loved, and felt something close to pity. Even now, even after everything had been exposed, he was still trying to rewrite the narrative to make himself the victim. "Trevor, the only thing I need to know about how you felt is that you felt entitled to use my money to cheat on me. Everything else is just self-justification." Security arrived then. 2 guards who'd been alerted by other late-working employees about the fire hazard in the garage. As they escorted Trevor away, he called back to me. "This isn't over, Natasha. I'm not giving up on us." But it was over. As I drove home through the scattered rose petals, past the extinguished candles being cleaned up by building maintenance, I realized that Trevor's grand gesture had actually been perfect. Not because it was romantic, but because it perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with how he approached our relationship. He'd created an elaborate display focused entirely on his own needs and desires without considering the setting, the circumstances, or what I might actually want. He ignored legal boundaries, dismissed my clearly stated wishes, and assumed that if he just performed love dramatically enough, I'd have no choice but to respond. It was manipulation disguised as romance, just like our entire marriage had been deception disguised as partnership. That night, I signed the final divorce papers with a steady hand and absolute certainty. Trevor's last stand had failed, not because his gestures weren't grand enough, but because he was still the same person who'd spent 2 years lying to me every single day. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And I was finally ready to stop looking back at the ashes. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment in Harborview, watching the sunrise paint gold streaks across the water. The space was smaller than the house I'd shared with Trevor, but it was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture chosen by me, every photograph on the walls reflecting my actual memories, every bill paid with money I earned and controlled completely. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Trevor had contested it initially, demanding alimony and half of our assets, apparently forgetting that most of our assets had been purchased with my income while he was spending that same income on another woman. When faced with the mountain of evidence I'd compiled, the apartment lease, the insurance fraud, the GPS records, the photographs, his lawyer had advised him to accept the settlement offer and be grateful he wasn't facing criminal charges. He'd walked away with his photography equipment, his clothes, and a firm agreement that he would never contact me again. I'd kept the house initially, but eventually decided to sell it. Too many memories, too many rooms where I'd discovered evidence of his lies. The sale had given me enough for a substantial down payment on this waterfront condo, plus a healthy emergency fund that would never again be accessible to anyone but me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Dinner tonight? That new place on Maritime Drive. I have news." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. 7 p.m.? Rachel had been my anchor through the entire ordeal, not once suggesting I should work things out or give him another chance. She'd helped me move, listened to me cry, celebrated with me when the divorce was final, and gradually helped me remember who I was when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's lies and failures. At Morrison & Associates, my promotion had been everything I'd hoped for and more. Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy came with not just the salary increase, but a level of professional respect I'd never experienced. Without the constant drain of Trevor's manufactured crises and financial emergencies, I'd thrown myself into my work with renewed energy. The campaigns I developed had won 3 industry awards, and I'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country. But the real transformation hadn't been professional. It had been personal.
I'd started therapy a month after Trevor moved out, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd allowed myself to be deceived so completely for so long. Dr. Amanda Reyes had helped me trace the patterns, how I'd prioritize keeping peace over protecting myself, how I'd mistaken Trevor's dependency for partnership, and how I'd normalized his constant need for financial rescue as supportive behavior rather than recognizing it as exploitation.
You weren't naive, Natasha, she'd told me during one particularly difficult session. You were loving. The problem wasn't your capacity for trust, it was his willingness to abuse it. I'd learned to cook for myself. Really cook, not just heat up takeout between work crises. I'd taken a pottery class and discovered I had decent hands for shaping clay. I'd joined a hiking group and spent weekends exploring trails I'd never had time for when I was managing Trevor's constant emergencies. I traveled to San Francisco for a work conference and stayed an extra 3 days just because I wanted to, without needing to check with anyone or worry about who would pay the bills while I was gone. The loneliness had been real, especially in the first few months. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Trevor about something funny I'd seen or automatically setting 2 coffee cups in the morning. But gradually, the relief of not walking on eggshells, not managing someone else's emotions, not discovering new lies and deceptions, had outweighed the sadness of losing what I thought we'd had. And I'd started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious yet, but I'd had dinner with Marcus, a colleague from another firm who made me laugh and who, refreshingly, paid his own bills. I'd gone to a concert with James, a friend of Rachel's, who was honest about his previous relationships and his current financial situation. Small steps, but steps forward. The most surprising development had been my friendship with Cassandra Mills. 3 months after the confrontation, she'd reached out through social media. A simple message: "I hope you're doing well. I think about that night often and how much courage it took for you to tell me the truth. Thank you." We'd met for coffee, then lunch, then gradually developed something I'd never expected, a genuine friendship built on shared experience and mutual respect. Cassandra had left the marketing job where she'd been struggling and started her own consulting business. She was seeing a therapist too, working through trust issues and the trauma of discovering that 2 years of her life had been built on lies. "I keep wondering what I missed," she'd said during one of our conversations. "What signs I ignored." "You didn't miss anything," I'd assured her. "Trevor was very good at lying. That's not your fault, it's his." We'd become each other's sounding boards, the only 2 people who fully understood what it felt like to discover that someone you loved had never actually existed. Our friendship was one of the unexpected gifts that had emerged from the wreckage of Trevor's deception. I hadn't heard anything about Trevor directly in months, though Rachel occasionally brought me updates she'd heard through the neighborhood gossip network. He was apparently living in a studio apartment across town, working part-time for a wedding photography chain. His independent business had collapsed when word got out about his behavior. Turns out that brides and grooms prefer photographers they can trust. His parents had maintained minimal contact, and his brother Jake had reportedly told family members that Trevor was dealing with the consequences of his choices. I felt no satisfaction in his struggles, but no sympathy either. Trevor was living the life he'd chosen when he decided that lying was easier than honesty, that taking was simpler than earning, that manipulation was preferable to genuine partnership. As I got ready for dinner with Rachel, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd walked into her house 6 months ago to discover rose petals and strange purses. This woman's shoulders weren't hunched with constant stress. Her eyes weren't scanning for signs of deception or preparing for the next crisis. Her smile was genuine, not performative. At dinner, Rachel's news was that she and Mike were expecting their first baby. As I hugged her and celebrated their joy, I realized something profound. I was genuinely happy for them, with no undercurrent of envy or bitterness about my own situation. For the first time in years, I wasn't comparing my life to others or feeling like I was behind some imaginary timeline. Walking home along the harbor, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. She'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to support a man who was using her efforts to betray her. She believed that love meant sacrificing her own needs for someone else's wants. She'd confused being needed with being loved, financial dependence with partnership, elaborate lies with complicated circumstances. That woman was strong, but she was strong in service of someone else's weakness. This woman, the one walking along the water with salt air in her hair and no one's crises to solve but her own, was strong for herself. I pulled out my phone and deleted Trevor's contact information, the last digital trace of him in my daily life. His number, his email, even the photos from happier times when I believed our life was real. Gone. The harbor stretched out before me, dark water reflecting city lights like scattered stars. Somewhere in the city, Trevor was probably crafting new lies for a new victim, or maybe he was genuinely trying to rebuild himself into someone capable of honesty. Either way, it was no longer my concern.
I had chosen myself. I had chosen truth over comfortable lies, independence over codependency, self-respect over the familiar pain of being used. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the future felt like something I was writing rather than something being written for me. Trevor had thought he could have everything. 2 women, unlimited financial support, the freedom to live however he wanted without consequences. In the end, he'd lost everything, including the ability to claim he'd been loved by someone who truly knew him. I'd thought I'd lost everything when I discovered his betrayal. Instead, I'd found myself. And myself, it turned out, was exactly who I'd been waiting to meet. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.